So I have been stuck on chapter 5 for the last year or so of this book, Living in a Mindful Universe, and not because it's boring or drags on or anything, but because it awakens something in me that forces me to stop and think about our life right now and whatever is to come after this. So the author, Eben Alexander, was a neurosurgeon, and he contracted bacterial meningitis and slipped into a coma for 7 days. While in that coma, he had a non-functioning neocortex. That's the part of the brain responsible for conscious thought, sensory perception, and memory. But by all scientific understanding, he should have been brain dead. No consciousness, no thoughts, no memory formations, no retaining memories. So when he eventually woke up from his coma, he came back with a memory of this vivid and elaborate journey that seemed to last much longer than 7 days. So let me explain what that feels like, where time does not exist. And I'm 1,000% sure it has happened to you. So imagine when you're falling asleep sometimes and you're not paying attention, and maybe you've been sleeping for 30 seconds, but you have already dreamt this long, very detailed dream. And it's like, how could that have happened in the 30 seconds that I fell asleep? It happens to me all the time. And my husband was the one that kind of made me realize, because look, I'll fall asleep if he's telling me something, if we're watching a movie or show or whatever. And I'll wake up and think, oh my God, I fell asleep. I dreamt this whole long thing. And he'll say, your eyes were closed for 10 seconds. How could you have dreamt all of that? And that's the stuff that kind of made me stop to realize, like, oh, wait a second. Yeah, it's like time didn't matter because I had this whole very vivid and detailed dream. In the 10 seconds, my eyes were closed. So I know that's happened to you. In any case, this neurosurgeon said that he was in a place with these beautiful landscapes and music he's never heard before. Okay, I have to cut in here because the way I said it made it sound like they maybe played a song that he was just not familiar with. But in actuality, he described it as the richest, most beautiful, complex music he's ever heard. And these beings of light and just things he's never experienced before. It was just like nothing he has ever lived through before. And most of all, the memory that he came back with was a feeling of being connected to something bigger, much bigger than us, than himself. And before his experience, before slipping into that coma, he was a neurosurgeon. And so he believed that the brain created consciousness. And really, once we die, there's nothing after this. So I'll read from my notes. He went on to write his best-selling book, Proof of Heaven, where he tells the story about his near-death experience and how it changed his understanding of consciousness and death and the afterlife. Then he followed it up with Map of Heaven, and then this book, Living in a Mindful Universe. And this book is the one that really bridges the gap between science and spirituality. So we're gonna get back to why I have to always stop reading this book and reread the chapters. So the part where I get tripped up is really on chapter 4. So this is where he explains materialism in science, and it's also known as physicalism, where just everything physical is the only thing that exists, right? The belief that just everything physical is all there is. And so that means that consciousness comes from the brain. And so everything we think, feel, experience, like the sunsets, the beautiful sunsets, the love we feel for our parents, our siblings, everything, our kids, all of that is just the result of a chemical reaction and electrical signals in the brain. And so there's nothing more that exists beyond our physical body, our physical world. And when we die, all that other stuff dies with us and we just stop existing. And so for me, that was devastating to hear because I've spent the majority of my life finding deeper meaning in literally everything and researching signs of something that's much bigger than us, something that exists outside of us, and the meaning of the lives we live and just all of that. And that this current reality that we're living, this current experience that we're having in this world is really just a speck of something bigger before this life and whatever comes after this life. And so that part made me think, well, if we think that there's nothing after this, like no wonder the world is in shambles. Because if the majority of people think this, then what is this for? What are we living this life for? What are we here for? How can anyone be expected to find meaning and purpose in this life if there's just nothing after this? So that led me through a spiral of thoughts of, okay, so if the majority of people, or the people who believe this, if they think that all the connections that we make with our family, our friends, like our kids, our pets, our parents, our siblings, if that just stops existing once we stop existing, how can anyone be okay with that? Like, why would we be okay with that? Why would we want to believe that? I guess for me, it just didn't click that there are some of us that are just okay with that. Like, okay, so I'll never see my pets, my kids, my family, my parents, and that's just it. So once we die, we're gone, goodbye. It was incredibly disconcerting. And so that's where I had to stop and think. So if all these connections and all this love that we felt, this joy, this happiness, if that just stops existing and all of that was for nothing, then what is the point of life? If it all dissolves into nothing, then what's all the effort for? So as you can imagine, the first time I read the first few chapters, I couldn't get over it. And I had to just go back and keep rereading because none of it made sense to me. And I needed something to make sense in order for me to keep moving. But here's the thing, that's not where Eben Alexander's story ends. In fact, his very experience goes against all those materialism beliefs. The experience that he had in his coma suggests something entirely different about consciousness, the world we're living in, the life we live, time, and what may come after this. So in the next part of this series, I'm going to unpack what happened when he woke up from his coma. Because the way he describes his journey will have you questioning whether time and space really exist the way we think it does.